Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transforming Today Show. I am your host, Rebecca Weintraub, and I'm an intuition coach. I help people discover, develop, and strengthen their intuition. And today I have the pleasure of having Paul Silva. How are you, Paul?
Great, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So tell us how you help your clients.
Thanks for asking. I am a transition coach. So I I usually work with people who are in some sort of transition in their life. So generally it's career. So, it was, either reigniting the passion for your career or, carving out an exciting path in their lives. But, what I'm finding is that, people of all sorts of transitions, have been approaching me. So I have people like in retirement, let's say, who are trying to navigate their way through different options that they have in retirement in terms of small time things. And I'm working with people in recovery, with in addiction, alcoholism. And if, when you think about it, that is a huge transition in people's lives, coming from a place of dysfunction, getting to a place of functionality, and now looking to, they've been given this second life and wondering, what can I do with it? And so I help people kind of navigate those roads and help them sort of tap into what it is that they want to do and where their passion lies, and how to get there, and with co-creating concrete plans to get them there.
Oh my God, I love this. I love this topic. And I'm excited because I wanted to share with our viewers that we're kind of taking a different turn with Transforming Today Show. We've done quite a few episodes so far, and I thought we would change the format a little bit. And instead of doing a straight interview, Paul and I discussed actually showing you what coaching is like. A lot of times we talk around coaching, but it's sort of like this big question mark that we don't really know what it is. It's a big mystery. So today, Paul is going to coach me for a little while, and then we're going to kind of talk about what he decided to do within the coaching and why he asked certain questions and what he was really hearing internally and intuitively. So we're going to do that today. And I love this because I sort of fall into, I guess you married it well, but for me, I've had an addiction to sugar my entire life, and it's been a struggle. And I know you talked about alcoholism, but in a lot of ways, like no matter what we're addicted to, whether it's like alcohol to video games to gambling, it doesn't really matter. We're all kind of wired the same, and we have our sort of drug of choice. So mine has been sugar my entire life, and I've just recently gotten to the point of where I finally confirmed to myself that I really can't have it. I mean, it's almost like any destructive drug. Drugs aren't necessary. That's the thing, where food is necessary. And so, you can easily say, okay, this drug isn't serving me, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And the work is around making sure that you don't do it anymore, and the reasons why, and enriching your life around the new life. But for people like me who are addicted to something that we actually need, it's difficult in a different way. And so I'd love to just spend a little time with you now, and let's show our viewers, what coaching really is. And if you're willing, if you'd like to, we could coach around this topic. That sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. And I was just laughing because you mentioned, your drug of choice, or, the drug of choice. And in recovery, we sometimes joke at the drug of no choice,
Right.
because it can feel like that. Definitely. So yeah, I'm totally open to working around that.
Okay, so typically, just so our viewers know, we usually ask a few questions to sort of set ourselves up for the coaching, make sure that, the client is working on what they want to be working on. We're going to skip that portion just due to time, and we're going to kind of dive right into it. So when you're ready, Paul, I'm ready. And we're both going to be taking notes.
Or note taker. So if you
We
see
are.
my wisdom patch here down a couple times, it's because I'm furiously making
I
notes.
love that.
What? But you know what? I'm glad that you mentioned that, what we call the coaching agreement, in terms of just making sure that the coach and the client are on the same page in terms of holding the client's agenda. And, so we are talking about sugar. So I'm just going to feedback to you what you had said in terms of what you'd like to work on, and that is this addiction to sugar, or a very high need to intake sugar. And the challenge that is surrounding it is that, unlike alcohol or recreational drugs or whatever it is, all the other, some behavioral items, things, this, sugar is a food, and, a type of food. It's a carbohydrate. And unlike those things, we require food, so it is not as simple as just pure abstaining. And so what you're saying is that that in itself is part of the challenge in terms of trying to step away from that addictive behavior. How accurate would that be?
That's pretty accurate. And I guess the one thing I will comment on is it's not impossible to cut sugar out of your diet. A lot of people do that. But there are times where, even if you ask a lot of questions, let's say you're at like a restaurant or something and you say, is there sugar? Is there flour? Is there cornstarch? Like all the things that I'm allergic to. They say, oh yeah, they check with the chef, but somehow it still gets in the food.
Yeah.
And for me, biologically, the second it gets in my body, like my little yeasties are saying, we need more, we need more.
Yeah, and so in terms of what you're saying there, is that there's an inherent, I wouldn't say danger, but there's this inherent thing where it's not guaranteed that you won't be ingesting this. And just to clarify, we talked about sugar, but you mentioned flour, cornstarch. Are those also in addition to sugar? That's something that is part of the prohibition in terms of what you can ingest?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually taken a lot of time to do a food inventory for myself. And I've like literally written down every single food that I absolutely love to eat. And I've categorized it. Like, is this like a green item for me where I have no problems?
Yeah.
Is this a red item where I definitely can't have it? Cake and Doritos. And then there's and then there's sort of like all these foods that fall in the middle that either associatively or behaviorally, I have a problem. So to give an example, it may be like I'm going to the airport and there's one restaurant that every single time I've been there, I've ordered French fries, let's say. Well, in this associative way, I'm standing there, and unless I change my behavior dramatically, I'm already programmed and wired to go get French fries at that restaurant. Right? So it's like there are a lot of foods that kind of fall into this middle category where they may not be biologically wrong for my body, but they lead to me going to something biologically wrong. So like, to expand on that, it's like if I had a baked potato, it would remind me of French fries, which reminds me of pizza, which reminds me of cake. So if I have a baked potato, I will eventually eat cake. And it's hard for me to reprogram that mapping.
Yeah. So so you're talking, these are great points that you're bringing up, Rebecca, because it's not just, I think, to someone who doesn't appreciate or understand what this is like, it's not necessarily just simple abstaining, because it's not just going to an aisle and just picking this and this. And it can be, because, we are going to be bringing this stuff home, but there is the behavioral part and the associative part. And, if you were to say, which of the two is right now is the most challenging to break out of?
Oh, I like that question. I lost my pen. Hold on. I'm thinking while I get my pen. Which of the two is harder? I think in a lot of ways they're like completely connected. I mean, it's almost hard to pick one or the other because it's driven by the addiction. So it's I think for me, it's really about like, how is the addiction behaving today? They both have a hold on me. They have like a lock on me, but it's like my addiction is sneaky. So if I'm like doing well with the behavioral stuff because I've like gotten on some kind of plan and I'm, working with a friend to, give feedback all day long about what we're eating, right? Like maybe the behavioral is like easier to manage. But if something happens where I turn the corner and now I'm like in a lunchroom, or I'm somewhere where there's some kind of item that's going to lead me to something that's not good for me, like that's on the high side. So they like fluctuate. It really depends, which makes it more complicated.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's just something that is situational. You could be at home and there may not be that associative, or, and you might be out and the associative goes up and the behavioral might change. If we could just take a step back for a second, Rebecca, we kind of jumped into this, but I just want to clarify in terms of, where would you where are you at right now with your sugar and flour and that kind of intake? Where are you with that right now?
So I probably tried every program in the world, including the maple syrup, cayenne pepper, and like lemon juice diet, right?
Yeah.
Like I've tried everything.
Okay.
I was in a spiritual group for some time that really worked for me, but it actually depleted other areas of my life. So it wasn't sustainable for me, even though there was a lot of benefit and I got a lot out of it. But in terms of a holistic life, it's just not like the entire solution for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out again and I tried a holistic health coach, thinking that, okay, there must be some kind of holistic way to do this. And for me, it didn't work. And I don't know if it didn't work because I didn't put more effort in, or if really my disease is so strong, this addiction is so strong that it really, I've gotten to the point where it's like, I just can't have it. I was trying to do it in moderation, like have my cake and eat it too. But, I don't think I can do it in moderation. So that's where I am like today. I'm sitting with the fact that I know I can't have sugar. I know I can't have flour, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to implement that and stick to it.
What scares you about pulling off of sugar and flour completely?
It's mainly because my husband is like the king of moderation. Like I almost can't stand it. He's so good at it, like it's almost, I call him like a switch hitter. It's like he'll have like a few beers and then maybe he'll have a few too many and he's like, ooh, I don't want to do that again. And he'll pull back, and then it's like he'll go to the gym, but maybe he goes twice in one day and he does that for a few days and he's like, that's too much. I'm like, how do you do that? So for him, it's like he can have any food he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And I've asked him, like, is it okay if we were to like remove certain things from the house? And then it's like talking about, well, if we go out to eat, like, is he allowed to order something that would entice me?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what scares me is that it's this, I'm not protected and I'm not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that really matters to me. I really just want to like press a button or click a switch or something where it's like I'm safe and protected, and if I choose not to have this sugar, like it won't be around me anymore. And I know that's unreasonable, but that's what I want, and it scares me that I can't have that.
Yeah, so it sounds that you talked about the moderation and how that is that's just not part of your your makeup right now, in terms of that sugar. And for any addict alcoholic, unfortunately they've lost that that power of choice when it comes to the moderation, because it has gotten to, as they say, there's that line you cross, right? When cucumber becomes a pickle, you can't cross it. And that sounds like that's where you've crossed and you're aware of it. And there's a bit of fear that, there's this inability to be someone like your husband who can moderate. And, you talked about, just feeling safe, what is that safety factor? What is it that you are looking to be safe from?
First word that comes to my mind is disruption. And what I mean by that is like getting disrupted. What's most important to me, my top value is intuition.
Yes.
And then my second value is balance.
Okay.
So when both of those are disrupted, sugar comes in and it kind of warps both of them. It's not that I'm not still intuitive. It's not that I am not experiencing on a grand scale balance in my life. I'm just so sensitive to the disruption that yes, I can function and my life is fine, but I like to function on this like different level when my intuition is like so strong and my balance feels so good and so safe. And I know that's not reasonable to always be there, but I do know that when I have the sugar, it is an absolute 100% fact that it will disrupt those two things.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about valuing intuition clearly and balance. And I find it, if I may share, I find it ironic in a way that, you know, for someone that likes balance or values balance, you know, moderation is balance, right? And not being able to moderate, you know, that in a way takes away from this balance, right? So we're going into something where, you know, abstinence and all that, which is the opposite of balance, right? Because now we've got to remove that. So I can see why that, even just at that level, might throw you off or might make you feel off kilter. When you talked about, or let me rephrase, can you tell me also a little bit more about what happens when you do take sugar, so or flour? You said your intuition goes off a bit, it's not as crisp maybe as you'd like it to be, and your balance is off. What else happens for you?
Well, it's sort of the you know, the emotional component is that I'm more irritable.
Mm-hmm.
I might be more impulsive. I get like angry faster.
Mm-hmm.
My perspective shifts, which is another thing that really bothers me about it. You know, normally for you coaches out there, I'm sitting for IPEC coaches. I usually sit at a 6, and a lot of 7
Mm-hmm.
floats out of my life. So like the 5, 6, 7 range is like normally where I resonate, but mostly 6. And when I eat sugar, it's like I lose the beautiful perspective that comes along with those higher energy levels.
Yeah.
And basically I just like shrink my vision into sort of like a thin tunnel vision rather than having this beautiful open understanding of the world and its people. And so I can feel myself, I can see myself, like I understand, like I can understand the mechanics of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not, sometimes these things that matter to me when I'm focused on them don't matter enough up against the sugar and the need for the sugar.
Yeah. And so as you mentioned, level 6, 7 energy, which is really connection and just, you know, utter passion, you know, unbridled, that kind of level, and where intuition flourishes. That's the level that intuition flourishes. When you take in sugar, it really kind of, you know, it really shrinks that, as you said. It's a great description of what that does. And Rebecca, you know, you talked about knowing, right? We know that, you know, alcoholics, addicts, they know, they have all the information. You know, it's like the people that would drink and watch Intervention on A&E. and you know,
Yeah.
and but they know, they see the information, but there's that compulsion. What is it that you are seeking? And this can be irrational, but what is it that you're seeking when you look to have sugar or anything with flour in it?
Usually it's to regulate my mood.
Mhm.
So like I do call them regulators, and you can have regulators. I mean, a regulator could be taking a walk versus, doing a drug or having the sugar. It could be regulators can be positive things, they can be negative things, and sometimes even what's typically seen as a negative thing can be a positive, like if done in the right way, could be positive, or vice versa, right? So like for me, sugar is this regulator that if I'm feeling like I don't have enough energy, or if I feel like I'm not like sharp enough, like if my mind is blurry, I will try to use it to regulate to a point of where I'm feeling fully functional and optimal. But usually what happens is I'll like overshoot, and then I get like almost too high, and it's like I'm buzzing around, and I'm like, I need to come down somehow. And that's when I usually use flour or some kind of heavy carb to
Mhm.
like, so I find myself a lot of times like regulating, but like overshooting while I'm trying to regulate. And when I don't have sugar, I don't have to do any of that. Like I feel optimal every day when I don't have sugar. So the question's like, why wouldn't I just do that every day?
Well, here's the question. Why wouldn't you do that every day?
I mean, I don't want to blame it on my disease, but it's
Mhm.
clearly there.
Yeah.
It does diminish itself the more I don't have sugar. It's not around as much.
Yeah.
But like we talked about earlier, if I have something in my food that was promised it wasn't in there and it's in there,
Yeah.
it's like it starts right up again. Or if
Yeah.
the temptation is to, like if I'm at a party, let's say, and even if I ate before or something and I'm full, but there's like cake and cookies and brownies like all over the table, it's just like I have to work really hard not to focus on those things. And sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's really hard. And when it's really hard, it's like if you've ever watched Inception, that movie, it's almost like the thought gets implanted, and then whether it's later that day or a week later, it's like I have to go and get that similar food.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like, you talked about the regulating, which is what a lot of alcoholics, addicts are looking for is, people think that alcohol or drugs are the problem, and many times that's the solution for many people to get away out of the space that they want to move out of. Mike, I'm curious, what is the longest you've gone without sugar, flour? What's your biggest success?
I think it was 2.5 years.
Okay. And how were those 2.5 years in terms of emotion, your emotional stability, and the need to find those mood, those enhancers, or the lack of? Can you explain or paint me a picture of what that looked like, those 2.5 years?
The result of those 2.5 years led to me coming up with my concept of intuition. And what I mean by that is a lot of people think intuition is that gut feeling. For me, it's way more than that. And the reason why I discovered that is because in those 2.5 years, I was so spiritual that I was to the point of where I really believed that like I was speaking the word of God. Like I had this other voice, it came from back here and it came through. And when I was talking to others in that spiritual program, I was helping so many people, and I got addicted. I almost switched addictions, and I got addicted to helping other people. And
Mhm.
so the food part went away, but my addiction to spirituality was really high. And so what I realized is you kind of need balance with even spirituality. Our culture points us to trying to be as spiritual as we can and meditate and yoga and do all these things and read about spirituality. But I'm a living proof that you can take it too far. And so that's why it wasn't sustainable for me. I loved the person that I was, but reality almost didn't exist at that point. It was really hard to do things like work. It was hard to have a relationship. That's when I met my husband, and he'd say, "Can we go out on Friday?" And I'm like, "No, I've got like 3 calls that I have to do in this spiritual group. Sorry, I can't." And that's when I started realizing, wait a minute, like I didn't have like my mental, emotional, and physical dimensions grounding me. I was living pretty much only in this spiritual dimension. And so that you asked me about fear earlier, and my fear is that the only experience I've had of taking the food away was by being so spiritual that food didn't exist.
Yeah. So what you're describing is it was almost like a switch up of addictions, if you will, where the food went away, which was a benefit to you because you were able to really heighten and really connect. I mean, you blossom into that level 6 that you talked about. But that also came with a price in terms of living your life.
I'll just correct one thing. I was living in 7, which we think is not sustainable, but it was sustainable, but it was dangerous. And and that's why I have a problem with using that method to help me regulate the food.
Yeah. Okay, understood. So has there been a point where you felt that there was that balance that you value so much? Was there ever a point where you realized that, yes, the food, the sugar, that's here, the rest of me is here, and there is some harmony between that, and that you were able to be that clear, intuitive, balanced person and keeping this over here? Has there ever been a point where, or what point in your life were you able to manage that?
I did that about a month ago
Oh,
I'm sorry. I did it like 3 months ago,
okay.
1 month or about a month.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of what got me. I think we just got lax about the rules around
Yeah.
in the house and stuff like that. And I think I was getting jealous that I couldn't have those foods. And maybe I didn't prove it to myself yet that like, this is an absolute, like I can't have it. Maybe I
Yeah.
was still trying to do it in moderation, but I did have success, like having a diet that didn't include it, and I
Hmm.
felt great. And I think it's more so about how do I sustain that? It's hard getting there, but once you're there, you feel great. This is great. I
Yeah.
can do it forever. But for me, it's more like, it's not about how do I get off and back on quickly. Maybe it is about that because that's just life. It's just going to happen. But
Hmm.
I do know people that for 30 years, they've never had sugar.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like there for a while you had it going where, and you had some ground rules. You laid some rules, it sounds like, in your household, and with the help of your husband, who obviously, understands what's going on and who can moderate, and sounds like he can really roll with the punches, which is great to have an ally in this, and that's fantastic. And you were able to do, and you said things start to slide a little bit, right? And once that opening happens, it sounds like there's that part that just says, this time it's going to be a little different. Don't worry. It's not going to go down that path again. And it sounds like it does, because that is the history, and that is the nature of the disease. It fights for its life, right? How are you, Rebecca, in terms of accepting fully that sugar and those starches, the flour, really cannot be a part of your life.
So if I break it into my 4 dimensions,
Okay.
mentally, I know 100% I can't have it.
Mm.
Emotionally, I'm pissed that I can't, but I'm getting to the point where I need to just surrender there.
Yeah.
My fears and anxieties are real in my 3rd dimension, my physical dimension. And I know that this is holding me back from things that I really could be accomplishing or experiencing right now. So the fear is real around how much longer I can try to get away with this. And then spiritually, my spiritual dimension is yelling, like flagging me down, like doing everything that it can to say, stop, please stop,
Yeah.
please stop. So that's, I broke it into dimensions, but
Well, that's great. That's very helpful. So it sounds, like mentally, and a lot of people that know this, they know it's, again, let's say people smoking, they know it's going to get, potential lung cancer. They know that, but because we are not driven at that conscious level, because so many of our habits are ingrained emotionally in the subconscious, that's what brings us to the behaviors and actions that give us the results, which in this case is getting back to sugar to regulate mood. You talked about emotional, just being angry, and that makes sense, that there's this sense of, why can't I have that? Why not me? Why? So that kind of going back to, if we're going to energy levels 1 and 2, kind of like really digging down there, right, in catabolic energy. And then you talk about fear, and how far can I get away? The words, I think, that were very powerful and stood out for me is, how long can I get away with this? Like it's like this taboo thing that it's almost like a bridge between the spiritual part, which is just like, just please surrender, and the mental part going, yeah, we can't do this. And then you have this emotional down here, and it feels like that fear is kind of touching a little bit of this, because it knows, right? It's like the kid that knows he shouldn't be going through his mom's purse, and kind of, and understands that it's not, shouldn't be doing this, but there's that compulsion, right? There's something there. And if you were to look at those 4 areas, which one would you, if you were to really kind of put a microscope on there, which of those 4 would like to look at to really understand?
I think it has to be the emotional. When you were just talking, it occurred to me that the relationship is really between the physical and the emotional, and that makes so much sense, right? Like, obviously, my physical body is being affected by the sugar,
Mm-hmm.
but emotionally is where my moods lie. It's where my feelings lie, and I'm trying to regulate my feelings and my moods.
Yeah.
The relationship between the two, it's almost like these bookends, right? You've got the 1st dimension, well, maybe to you guys,
Yeah.
dimension is over here, it's mental. The 4th dimension is spiritual, and it's like a SHIT sandwich in the middle, right? Like the emotional and the physical are just not where the mental and the spiritual are.
Yeah.
These 2 are so strong. They're like these pillars. And then inside, it's like a bunch of mush, and it's a hot mess.
Or I was thinking sugar. That's another sandwich, instead of the essay.
A sugar sandwich, yeah.
So you're talking. So it sounds like definitely it's the emotional part that really is driving that train, in terms of, because mentally and spiritually they're on the same page, like they're those strong pillars. The physical, you understand where that is going with you, what that makes you feel when you take it. You described how that makes you feel, and how it really, in the end, it taps into the emotion, the irritable, getting quick to anger, really kind of. And the real challenge when it comes to addiction of any kind is, you know, is just so multi-layered. It's never just one simple thing, because that all ties in. The physical, there's the physical crave, like there's the mental, you know, what we call the mental obsession, and then there's the cravings as well. And it seems irrational, and it is irrational in so many ways. People looking on the outside in will just say, well, there are people like your husband, you know, who say, well, just don't have it. It's easy to say, have one chip. Can you just have one chip? Let's see you try that. I try to explain that to people. But if you're looking at this, you know, anger you talked about, emotional, where do you think that stems from, in terms of, it sounds like the part of that is, or you tell me, you know, what is that anger directed at? Where's that anger going?
I think it's like, I think I'm pissed that I can't just be like everybody else that can have a bite of a brownie and say, oh, that's so rich. Like, possibly eat the rest. Are you kidding me? Give me like the whole box, you know, or the whole whatever container. It's like, I'm just mad that, I'm mad that I can't do, I'm not mad that I can't have the food, because when I'm not having it, it doesn't even matter to me. I think I'm mad that I can't do it in moderation, you know, to come full circle. Like really, I'm mad that I can't moderate it.
Yeah. And where do you see the connection then between that inability, that anger of not being able to moderate, and what you had mentioned earlier about surrender? What's the tie-in between those two, as if you see one?
Yeah, I mean that's the key to it, right? And that's I like that you brought that up, because my emotional, like I could even get my physical to surrender, because the fear of, like, let's say getting to 800 pounds, or the fear of, you know, not being selected for something because of the way that I look, or not being able to walk upstairs without like huffing and puffing, you know, or something like that. All those things, like I can surrender to my physical dimension and say, okay. But when it comes to my emotional dimension, like that's, I like that we're talking about this, because I love your coaching, by the way, and we'll talk about it after, but like, you know, people talk about emotional eating, and it's sort of like this like light term that's thrown around. And I don't know how you want to categorize what I'm actually doing and how I'm wired, but I will say that the emotional dimension for me is the one that I'm having a really hard time surrendering.
Yeah. And what would that look like if you could surrender on the emotional plane?
Well, the first word I think of is peace. You know, like it wouldn't, the issue would almost like go away, right? But I would still have to work at maintaining, you know, not eating the sugar and stuff like that, of course.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I've been there before, and I feel such peace, and I turn into this helpful, very, very, I mean, I'm helpful anyway, but like very, very helpful, almost to the point of maybe, like I was talking about before, too helpful. But you know, my best qualities and my best characteristics are leading at that point, and that matters a lot to me. And I can't really do that when I'm caught up in my own stuff that honestly, it's not even real. You know, like we can create drama over stuff that's not even real. Like it's fake, literally fake drama, as people say.
Yeah.
And when I'm feeling great, when I'm feeling optimal, when I'm not having sugar, I don't create fake drama in my life. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you really, you connected that real over holistic well-being, you know, and tapping into this higher being of service, and not only to others, but to yourself, right? There's this sense that, and then peace. I mean, when you've created that space for yourself, that's when the rest of you flourishes, right? And that is the ideal, right? That's your ideal.
It is and it's not.
Mhm.
It is my ideal, but I'm absolutely fearful, and this is where the fear comes in. This is why
Mhm.
it's still a mess with the fear. Um, I'm fearful that if I get there again,
Yeah.
even though it's going to be a different way and it's not again, it's like a new journey, but
Mhm.
similar. I might take it too far again.
Yeah. And yeah, I hear that, because it is something that it helped you until it stopped helping you and became a hindrance. What what other ways have you looked at to sort of safeguard that it doesn't go pear-shaped that way again? If
I
you did
haven't,
that, yeah.
and that's really where my work is. And I hired someone to help me with that, and we didn't. The focus was elsewhere during that time, and I should have probably spoken up more, because my intuition tells me that the real problem here is that I'm afraid of going there again. And it's so funny because here comes moderation again.
Yeah.
It's like I have to apply moderation to something that works for me. Is that even possible? That's really what it's about. Like I know it works. I could start tomorrow. If I really
Yeah.
wanted to, I could start tomorrow. Like no sugar, no flour, everything.
Mhm.
And I get to this optimal place. But what happens if I start lifting off the ground again? And what happens if I don't really live in reality again? Like the practice there is to find someone to help me figure out how to not rise so far. Like if each dimension is 100, if 100% in each dimension is optimal,
Mhm.
if I take my spiritual to 200%, what I've experienced is that my mental, emotional, and physical dimensions start lessening to the point of where they're almost not existent, and my
Mhm.
judgment is off, and you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
they're affected in other ways. So I need to figure out how to bring spirituality to about 100%, but not spill so much over that I'm I'm affecting the other dimensions, because I need, again, I'm an intuition coach. I need all four to be in balance in order to really have intense, intuitive energy coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. And how willing are you to work at maintaining that balance of the spirituality, especially the spirituality, to make sure that it doesn't flare up to the other side, and then we kind of go through that cycle again.
I think that's the work that I need to do. I
Yeah.
think, you know, this was kind of dancing around my head a little bit. I kept revisiting it and not. So I love that this conversation led us there, because I really do think the work is around how do I how do I not eat sugar but moderate my spirituality? Like that's really
Yeah.
the
Yeah. I love that's where that's led. That now it's shifted a little bit, and it seems like even as you're talking, like it's kind of gotten away from that grind of the sugar, and all that kind of. Now it's kind of now feels like that the pedal is off a little bit, and it's like, okay, now it's really about this, right? And there's that shift in now this. It sounds like can be a bit more manageable, because you've already thought like I just need someone now to help me with this, because this I can do this down here, but here I just need someone to kind of ease me on this one. So that's a new journey. That's something, you've cut sugar, gone back on, cut back, that whole dance that people, who are active in whatever addiction they do that back and forth. But this is different. It sounds like to you, like
Mhm.
it's a different shift, and it And it's sort of, I'm just picturing it like literally as we're going up and looking down, the sugar is down here, but now this is a different plane we're on, and it creates and it feels more spacey. I don't know if that is for you, but it feels like it's a different kind of approach. How does that resonate with you?
It, I like that, but I almost want to just add that, you know, when you're saying here the
Mhm.
space level, if that's true, there's a higher level which represents going out of control with it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because
that makes, yeah.
when I say the word space, when spacious is with spirituality, to
Mhm.
for me, that's too high.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense then. So thank you for clarifying. Yeah. I thinking of, so thank you for sharing that. So in terms of space, I meant space as in space to reflect on it, like space to kind of see it in a different light, as opposed to like you feeling like you're in a hot air balloon and it just, you keep going. Like you're waiting for it to pop and then the plummet goes down. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
That
so, well, it sounds like, you've gotten to, getting to a place where now, all right, it sounds like now you can look at this through a different lens, at least.
Yeah, this was, yeah, let's pause here with it
Okay.
because first of all, this was extremely helpful for me, like, as your actual client today. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Not with my Transforming Today show host hat on. I want to first thank you so much for taking the time um, for really helping me with this.
oh, okay.
Like, because we could have done this and it was like, oh, we could have talked around it and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
like, viewers, this is why coaching is so absolutely powerful, because what we talked for however long, like less than an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and look at what Paul led me through. I mean, he was able to pick up on so many beautiful things. Like at the beginning, just so you understand, like sort of what happened here. You know, we're talking about moderation. We're talking about feeling safe, and then he brings. You know, I tell him my different values, and he's really intuitively listening here. He's listening to the words that I'm saying, but he's listening on this level that's like beyond the words, and he's able to connect that, you know, there's this moderation factor that I simply just can't get my arms around when it comes to food. Yet my second most important value is balance. When in a lot of ways, those two are like the exact same thing or can be completely comparable. And so, you know, it was this conversation about abstinence and balance and moderation, and how can you introduce abstinence when really we're trying to find that balance that you need. And it's, you know, he made a very confusing subject extremely easy to navigate. And he went, you know, just simple question by simple question, but he was really unraveling sort of what was at the heart of this issue. You know, we talked about sugar, we talked about the food, yeah, but in a lot of ways that's kind of like the noise, you know, going on here. Really what we got to is, you know, how do I not eat sugar, but how do I manage the spirituality not going too high? Like that's where we really arrived, and that's really what has been sitting with me. And so Paul, like when you were navigating all of this, what was that higher level, as we say sometimes, what was that higher level coach indicating to you as you were navigating me through this subject matter?
Good question. You know, that is something that I do a lot. That's what I try to do is look between, as I like how you call it, the noise, because that's the story, right? That's the story. And as coaches, a lot of coaches like to go, into the story of the story, right? And so that was my intention was, I understand all this, but really in my mind, that's always the question is, but what's really going on?
Mm.
But what's really going on? And I don't often say that, but I'll phrase things so that we can actually kind of just very, very lightly unpeel a little bit and just kind of see what's there. It doesn't always stick, but at least we're moving in that direction. So I think I was really curious about what was beneath that noise, because you can talk circles about diet and, plans to, don't be around sugar if you feel unsafe. Like you can do that. And there are people that do that and they do a very good job. But understanding recovery and addiction that I do, I know that's, until we get to the core of it, all of that, it's window dressing.
So when you were getting these intuitive indicators that there was something deeper here, getting yourself out of the story and into what we really wanted to talk about, how much of those indicators were coming in real time for you as I was speaking, and how much did you know and you were more so leading me because you could see the pathway before I was going there?
A lot of the times when I'm making my notes, it's they're single words, so they're single words, and so I catch, a lot of times I get these as like, it's just like a ding. I get it, right? As soon as someone says it, I get it. And so, but I don't stay there. I keep listening. Mm-hmm. And it sort of starts to create a little opening. And so that's where I slowly start to move. So I'm listening to the client, I'm listening to you. I have my ideas, but I'm not jumping on them because you're the client. But I definitely see a way, because you're giving me pieces and I'm kind of building a little, path with that. And so I kind of catch it as it goes. And then I have an idea of maybe where I want to go with it, but I don't jump on it. It is intuitive. Like it really, it's hard to explain. I mean, you're intuitive coach. It's so hard to explain because I'm just listening. It's just, you're absorbing, and it just comes, and you just kind of go with it. And the more, what I found in my coaching, that the more I resist it, like when I go against my intuition, I find that it just goes gangbusters. It's not going where it needs to go. And so, there's clues, you're dropping breadcrumbs. And so I just kind of pick up on them and I just go with it.
I love that. Yes, that's how I experience it as well. I get, and when I described before it coming through, like when I was very highly spiritual, there was no like stopping. There was nothing that was like a barrier. It would just like come through, and it would come through me. Now what I experience with more balance around my spirituality is that the words, the phrases, and the questions, even questions or concepts, whatever, the visuals that I get, they stop right here. And they sit right here. And all I have to do is like grab it. I usually write it down as well. That's why I always have to, whenever I'm working with clients, I always have to write. It's just the way that I channel, but yeah, they just stop right here for me, like whatever it is. So I'm actually curious, would you be willing to share any of the words that you wrote down?
Yeah, I mean, I had written, I mean, you mentioned disruption. I put down your values: intuition, balance, moderation. I put irrational down because that's something that we got to eventually, but that came early. Irrational. Acceptance, I wrote. Fear, anger. So these were things that you said, but there were some things that I had written down, like, conflicted, where in recovery, there's a lot of that. I wrote imbalance. I wrote, there's little notes of, I sometimes even just question marks. I'll just write question marks, right? Because there's something that you have said, I'm like, I'm going to explore that. I don't even write what it is. I just kind of know eventually I'm going to get back to the question mark, right? But, and a lot of times what was great is that you clarified a lot of things, like like disruption. That was the first thing I was going to say. What does that mean to you? But you explained it right away. So that was good. That is something I would have looked into. But it is just, it's just a word here and there, like, and just little thoughts that I had, like I said, unsure, and even now I don't even know where that, unsure, that probably came out somewhere that maybe we didn't use it, but it's just those little things, that they're like touchstones
Mm-hmm.
for me along the path.
I love it. And one of the major ones for us today was the word fear.
Mhm.
What made you stop on that word and put emphasis on it towards the end there to kind of bring everything together?
That was one of the first words I had written too, was fear. And I believe early on, and this was one of those questions where I had to I almost took a leap of faith, because you hadn't mentioned fear. But I said, what are you afraid of? I can't remember quite the question, but it was something about, what are you afraid of? Or what do you fear about something such and such, or taking sugar or something. You hadn't brought up fear before.
Mm.
So that was my intuitive leap. Like, I just felt like there was something about fear. And so then when it came full circle around, when you broke it down into those 4 kind of areas,
Mm-hmm.
and you mentioned fear as that, I said, okay, so there's that connection, because you brought it up. It was this time you brought it up. And I think it's just because fear is such in anything that we're coaching, fear is just the foundation for so much of our how we react, how we respond, our paradigms, everything is so much can be fear based, and anger, once you go underneath anger, it's fear.
Mm.
So the talk about love and fear, there's the 2 primal emotions, I believe that, and so underneath everything is fear, as far as I'm concerned, and that's just the way I approach it.
Well, I loved it, and it was so helpful, Paul. I can't even thank you enough, because you really, I'm walking away today. See, viewers, this is what coaching does. Like, sometimes you get to there's a lot of different types of way to coach. Today, Paul and my objective was not to have me come out with a checklist of things that I'm going to do in order to keep off of sugar, right? This was a deep dive into understanding the roots of why the addiction is so powerful, and how I can arrest everything that comes along with that disease to focus on what's really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking away today with a to-do. Even though our objective wasn't a checklist, my to-do is now to really think about and research how I am going to have someone help me use the method that I used before that worked so well, but without taking it to an extreme. And that is such a valuable lesson. And I really thank you, Paul. So obviously you have showcased how wonderful you are with your coaching. And I mean, I can see it so clearly, and I know others can see it. So if they wanted to contact you, if they wanted to work with you, I know, just tell us everything. You have a website, just
Yeah.
go. Tell us.
Do the shilling. Yeah, thank you so much. And I appreciate having been able to do that. And it's just something I love doing. And thank you for allowing me to do that. My website is www.paulsilvacoaching.com. So pretty straightforward. All the information is there, and I have a list of all the types of coaching that I do. And In Recovery is one of them. I also deal with, as I said, transition, so individuals or people in career. But certainly I have a deep connection with recovery, having been an alcoholic myself. So there's, part of my story. And in telling the story, I mean, I started with a blog, and I had a podcast called Buzzkill Pod, which is still out. It's on SoundCloud. And all those are on the website. And I wrote a book too. It's called Longing for the Spirit.
Oh, I love that title. And look at that picture.
I know, it's
cool. Hold it up. Keep holding it up. I really love that.
Yeah. And
is that flying over? Are those clouds?
No, that's water. So light going underneath the water.
Oh my God.
So it's messages of faith and hope from beyond the bottle. So these are essays, essentially. It's a quick read. It looks like a big, but I know a lot of people ton of people have read it. They loved it. They said it's a quick read. And it's just a bunch of essays talking about recovery through the lens of spirituality and transformation. And a lot of humor. So I'm a bit of a smart ass. But it really shows that, that it's not so heavy-handed. We come out of this. I mean, what we go through in recovery, wow, that's where the real work is. And so that is just my contribution to recovery. And so all the information's on the website, and if anyone wants to work together, I'm more than happy to talk to them and figure out if it's a fit.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I loved having you on. Thank you so much, Paul. And thank you to our viewers. I hope you loved today. We're trying this new format and it's so powerful. It's like incredible. I mean, I'm the client, so I can feel it, but I think others can feel it too.
I feel it.
This thing called coaching, it's just so powerful, and we demonstrated that clearly today. So Paul, thank you again so much, and viewers, we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.